Life is hard. You've probably thought that to yourself at least once before in the past. That's the whole point of this podcast, to take it and make it easy. One of the reasons you struggle so much is because it can feel like there's no guidance, like there's no rule book to this stuff to take you from A to Z. But what if there were rules to the game of life? And rules that, if you followed, would make sure that you came out a winner. Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Levitin, a board licensed coach who has been helping people just like you create lasting positive change in their health, wealth, and relationships for over a decade. H.T. Leslie said, "The game of life is not so much in holding a good hand as it is playing a poor hand well." When you know how to play the game of life, it doesn't matter what cards you've been dealt. Knowing the rules and the proper strategy is what leads to real life success. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Carolyn Mahbubi. Carolyn is a life and leadership coach who works with some of the most successful and interesting people in the world. After a successful career in the fashion industry, Carolyn pivoted later in life to a new career path where she could be more in charge of her own destiny and use her knowledge and skills to truly help people. Now, she uses her passion to empower people to take the reins of their own life, accept radical responsibility, and win the game of life. In this episode, Carolyn and I discuss whether it's more important to have consistency or intensity, the difference between quitting and surrendering, the habits that the most successful people all have in common, and make sure you listen in for the key point Carolyn makes about active action over passive action. That one is a game changer. And with that, enjoy this conversation with Carolyn Mahbubi. What is the game of life?
The game of life is our lives as we live through them individually, and how so many people think that life is something that is just happening to them. And I know you believe in this because I've listened to a lot of your work. I believe that life is actually a game, and it's a finite game. To use Simon Sinek's words, it has a beginning, a middle, an end. It's got winners, it's got losers, and it's got rules, just like any other game. And we are generally not taught those principles, those rules. In school, we are taught math and English and history, but we are not taught life skills and rules. And so we sort of go into the world. I love an example you used of opening a box of Monopoly and without directions. And we're like, so we all sort of run around trying to figure out what this game is about. Whereas there are people who have come before us and who have played this game like pros. So my work is very focused on taking my clients, myself. I work a lot with young adults, from being amateurs in the game of life to being pros in the game of life.
Yes, super interesting. There's a lot of different pieces that we're going to expand on that. And as you said, you and I are very aligned in a lot of our thinking on this type of stuff. But I'm interested, you mentioned infinite and finite games. It's interesting to me that you said, like, well, life is a finite game. I think a lot of people talk about this stuff as like life is the infinite game. So I'm interested how you chose to take it in that direction.
So life is finite because it has an end. And people who don't realize that and who think they have all the time in the world and are kind of just, trying to find themselves and, float through life. No, life has an end and the clock is ticking. But we need to have an infinite mindset in terms of our growth. So it's true that there are so many levels to playing this game. And as soon as you are good on one level, you excel at one level, you realize, oh shit, there's a whole other level. But this is what it means to be a pro. Kobe Bryant was never satisfied with where he was. For him, he had the infinite mindset, but he also had a real understanding that time is ticking. And sadly, we saw that with his life. And he really brought everything he had to every moment. And I'm saying we need to bring everything we have to every moment of our day because time is ticking.
So you mentioned learning from the people who have been successful before us, the pros that we've seen. Kobe Bryant is a great example. There's tons of biographies, there's tons of just people, mentors that we can look up to. But how do you define success to be able to look towards someone? Like what does it mean? What am I looking for when I'm looking for someone who quote unquote is a pro or who is playing the game correctly?
I'm glad you used the word success and the phrase, how do you define success? One of the first things I do with my clients, I'm sure you do it with yours as well, is to drill down their definition of success. So what the benchmarks of success are can be different for all of us and will be different for all of us. What it takes to get there is not different for all of us. For example, consistency will always trump intensity. So people who live life with intensity being sort of their North Star, stretches of, moments of intensity, one after another, versus people who have intensity, know how to infuse intensity in the right moments. But basically, they have consistency. And you talk a lot about habits. You know that those are the people that at the end of the day win the game of life, regardless of what their definition of success is.
So consistency over intensity, I think that's a great one. What are some of the other, as you said, rules or fundamentals that kind of go, I always say, a layer deeper? So it doesn't matter what your thing is that you're trying to be successful in, whether it's business, whether it's health, whether it's relationships. We have these fundamental rules that underpin everything. So if we say that, consistency always wins, consistency over intensity, that's one. What are some of the other ones that you've seen in your work over the last, several decades? Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds. But right now, I just have to tell you about my free weekly newsletter. If you want to join the thousands of change seekers just like you who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content to help you on your quest for change, then click the link in the notes that says free newsletter right now. You'll get signed up for free tips that will make your change journey easier, sent straight to your inbox every Friday. All you have to do is click free newsletter in whatever app you're listening on. Okay, now back to the show.
Yeah. So one of the main ones, and you talk about this, is no shortcuts, no hacks. So amateurs take shortcuts and hacks. Pros actually take the long cuts. They go the long way. Right off the bat, from the beginning, they understand that this is the way it works if you're going to be successful in life. No shortcuts.
And I'm curious, as you mentioned that, right? You're saying the people who are most successful, the pros, they just know, right? You can't take any shortcuts. Consistency. We kind of know all of these things. How is it that you think the people who are successful, the pros, as you said, have come to figure this out? Is it something that they're innately born with? Is this something that's taught to them? Like, why is it that some people are on it and they get it, and so many people struggle with the same stuff?
Yeah. I'm an example of somebody who for 4 decades, I wasn't getting it. So I was gaining a lot of knowledge. I was reading and listening to podcasts. And then, of course, Instagram came along with all the mantras, and I studied every religion and tried everything for a while. But when it was time to transform knowledge into wisdom through action, which is really what coaching is about. The whole field of coaching came into being because there was a need for it from therapy not moving people into action. Now, therapy has come a very long way. So I don't want to get hate mail about this because therapy has come a long way. But in my time, it was very much about talking. And it wasn't about moving into massive action. It was being It was a lot about being in motion, but not actually in action. The difference between people who actually change their lives rather than talk about it, but really change their lives, is a commitment. It starts with a decision and then a commitment to doing the work. That looks like something every single day. I mean, I wish I had my notebook with me here. I have the 4 things that I must do every day in order to be confident that I am in action. I'm not fooling myself by being busy, by being in motion, by talking about things, and at the same time, procrastinating. It's very easy to be in that space, and it's very easy to fool ourselves, even someone like me who's in this world of action and committed. So every night before I go to sleep, I have to check these 4 boxes, and sometimes there's not a check. Sometimes there's a flat line because I didn't do that thing. But as you know, and you've talked about, it all starts with awareness. So if I see 4 days where, for example, writing is a flat line, I'm like, oh yeah, you're starting to think you're a writer, but actually you're not, because, a writer writes, and you haven't written in 4 days.
I love that. A writer writes. It's these things that we tend to overcomplicate so much and overthink. And I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit more, the tools that you use to make sure. I love the distinction you made between being in action and just being busy, because the reality is people, it's a false dichotomy, I think, where people think that they're choosing between doing something and doing nothing. Like if that were the options, then we would choose to do something. But the reality is we're all busy 100% of the time already. No one is adding something to their routine without taking something else away. So we feel busy because we have busy work and we have procrastination. We have a million other things. So how do you personally, either for yourself or with your clients, make sure that you're moving the needle?
So everything I do with my clients, I've done personally and I continue to do personally. This is the only profession in the world where you have to be completely whole and integrated. A brain surgeon can do incredible work on your brain, and then they can go home and they can eat shit and, drink and be a horrible person. And you'll still choose them if God forbid, someone has a brain tumor. Coaches can't do that. This is the only profession where our own legitimacy, commitment, credibility, doing the work will decide whether you will be successful or not. Successful coaches, 100% of the time, are modeling and are living into the values that they teach and coach. Number 1 tool is coaching, okay? Or some version of that, whether it's having a mentor, whether it's being part of a group. We do not see what is going on with ourselves alone. We just can't. It's how we're made. We see ourselves when we write. That's very helpful. We see ourselves when we are in conversation with someone else who is more of a neutral party, who doesn't have an agenda. So to get yourself in a community or in work with a professional who can reflect back to you and allow you to access your own highest wisdom, I have not found a better way to actually change my life. So that, I would say, is number 1. The second is, and maybe even before that, is what Brooke Castillo calls the difference between massive action and passive action. You must understand the difference between these two. Listening to podcasts, reading, getting certified, going to school, these are all important and often required, but they are not sufficient, and it doesn't mean you're actually changing your life or creating any kind of transformation. Most people, Paul, don't know the difference between these two. So when you say they're busy, they are busy with things that look like work, look like something that's changing their life, but it's not. We all know people like that, and it's as if they just transfer what they learned onto their Instagram page or preach to other people, but they're not really, people can see that their own life is not changing, and so they're not credible. You have to be able to measure what it is that you want to change. In one of your podcasts, you talk about how just change is difficult. It is how It is. Like, it's not a bug in the system. It's a function of the system. It's a feature of the system, right? So to make change, we need support, we need accountability, we need to measure it, we need to be on top of it every day, all the time. It's like people get excited because they do something and they see a big change, like go to coaching or go to the gym or lose 20 pounds on a certain diet. Well, you and I both know the actual work begins after that. You can't stop going to the gym. You can't stop doing whatever you need to do to keep expanding your consciousness. And you can't start eating, like you used to again. So I have not found a better way to measure it than being in conversation keeps me very conscious. I have a coach myself. And also, I write. I have a journal where I write everything. And then I have a different journal where I measure everything. I have decided, and I do this exercise with my clients, it's called the Life Buckets exercise, where based on their values, which I think every coach does this first, finds out what are your top life values. We then decide what are the actions in your everyday life that are aligned with those values and allow you to feel that you are actually doing what matters to you. Because the biggest problem people have is they put their head on their pillow at night. They've been busy all day long. And they're like, wait, what did I do? What happened? And suddenly they realize they didn't do the things that matter. So for me, there are 4 things. One is training, because I'm an athlete and I need to be training every day. And training could mean walking. It could mean run. Usually it's running because that's my sport. So one is training. The second is parenting. Even though my children are now 22 and 24, parenting today means making sure I'm in touch with them every single day, even if it's a 5-minute conversation. I don't want to go to bed not having made that connection. The third one is service. And that usually means in service of my clients. But let's say it's a day where I don't have clients, like it's a weekend or something. I know that box needs to be checked at night. So I'm thinking, how can I serve? How can I serve? And someone starts talking to me and, my default is to be like, whatever, I don't have time for this. I need to get to, and I slow down and I sit down and I say, tell me more. There's so many ways to check the box, but you have to understand what box you're checking and why. And then the fourth one is to write. I need to write every single day in order to put my head on my pillow at night and feel like, yes, I contributed.
So for someone who is listening, are these 4 pillars that you just laid out, training, parenting, which we can sum up as connection, service, and writing, is that you, Carolyn's values and what you've created for yourself? Or do you think of these more as a foundational thing that just as humans, these are the things that we need to be, training our body every day, connecting with others, and like writing is it's all part of just the human experience?
It's completely personal to me. And it has changed. Sometimes I'll have these 4 for 6 months, and then I'll realize, I'm kind of being very conservative. I find myself acting conservatively, not taking chances. So, I change out one of these pillars because you can't have like 10 of them. You can have 3, 4, or 5. That's doable. I'll change it for adventure, and every day I need to have done something that felt a little adventurous to me, or maybe I'll make it discomfort. Every day I need to do something if I feel like I'm becoming very used to being comfortable. So they're super personal. Every single one of my clients has different headings, depending on what matters to them.
And And are you actually physically checking these off? Like you have them written down in your notebook or your journal and you check them off every night?
Yes. Do you want to see it? But I'd have to go get it.
No, I believe you. I believe you.
Okay.
I'm just looking for, again, like tactically. I'm very big on putting pen to paper as well. I think there's
Yes.
something specific. One, I mean, I think from a feeling there is, but also the way our brains work. Having to write something feels differently. It's a different neural connection than typing it or saying, "Hey Alexa," or whatever the hell else that people do. So I think that's very powerful and very potent. But I always come back to the game of life
Mm,
and the reality of it's not a game in the sense that, you mentioned that I use the analogy of the Monopoly game, right? But in the real game of life that we are all in right here, some people open that game of Monopoly and there's pieces missing, or there's no money in it, or they're
mm.
already in jail, or whatever analogy you want to use from that. So how do people start to win the game when they've been dealt a bad hand from the start?
Mm. Oh my God, that's such a good question. And, there's a part of me that feels like, because I really was born into so much privilege, when I look around me and see what's going on in the world. But there is one distinction that applies to everyone, everyone. And we have a lot of science behind this, people who have just been dealt such a bad hand and have still managed to win the game of life when you look at their lives in the long term. And that distinction is between having a victim mindset or an owner mindset. And there's nothing new about this, but, I don't know who said this. Everything that needed to be said has been said already, but since nobody was listening, we have to repeat it, right? So it's really about making a decision, whether you're going to be the person who is at the cause of life and woe me, and this is happening to me, or you're going to take ownership and do what you can with what you have.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you on the same. I recognize my privilege and everything that has my life has been easy in so many ways, and I see people who have struggled much more. But the reality is, we are playing with the hand that we were dealt, and like you can't change that. So it's what can you change? What can you focus on? What can you affect? And the reality is, there's plenty of people out there who were born with less than either you or I and are far more successful. And there's plenty of people who are born with more than every person who's listening
Facts.
to this who have nothing now. So, yes, it can be annoying to hear, but getting out of that victim mentality is hugely impactful for people. And I think to flip that, it's like, what are we looking towards? Something that I've
Mm.
heard you speak about before is living a purposeful life. So I'm curious, what does that mean specifically to you, and how does it direct your decisions as you go throughout life?
So it's related to what we were just talking about, life buckets and your highest values. I do a values assessment with my clients, and of course I've done it myself, where you've got to figure out what are your top 2, 3 values. You give an assessment to people and say, rate these values from 0 to 10. And if you don't give them directions, everything is a 10. Every single thing is a 10. 100 things are a 10. When you do the exercise correctly and really whittle it down, and you are forced to choose 2 or 3, you realize, oh, wow, this is what's most important to me. So for me, for example, my top 2 values, life values, are freedom and faith. By faith, I don't mean necessarily religion, but I mean a connection with a higher force, a connection with something bigger than myself. Those 2 things will feed into the activities that bring purpose to you, bring purpose to your life. This is why, or the buckets that bring purpose to your life. And then we decide on what are the activities that are deposits in those buckets. So you've got values, then we decide these are your life buckets. And, you again, you can't choose 10, but You could choose fun and, fun and adventure can be a bucket. Parenting can be a bucket. Marriage can be a bucket. Relationships, friendships, service, your professional life, money. There's so many things that we have to understand, okay, what are the 3-4 things that matter most to you? From there, we decide what are the actions that bring meaning, bring those things to life. You use the word ephemeral, I think. Everything is ephemeral until you make it real. So we always end up with, okay, what are the actions? And then those actions make your life purposeful. A lot of people get this they get it wrong. They think they need to figure out a grand purpose first and then go from there. I don't agree with that. I think you need to find the number of things that have a compound effect of bringing purpose to your life. Then you decide those actions. Then you make sure you do those actions consistently. And purposefulness is a result. It's not a starting point. It's a result of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And it comes back to exactly what you mentioned right in the beginning, which is just, as you said, consistency. It's the small things done over and over, living in accordance with your values for a long time. The only possible outcome from that is a purposeful life. If you take the time to know your values, which, as you said, most people don't know, but if I take the time to know my values and then I make a effortful plan to live by those values and live them out each day and finish each day moving the needle forward, as you said, checking those boxes, then the only thing that can happen is a life of purpose and a purposeful life. So I love that you said it's not the actual thing that you start with, it's the end result. And I can see how all of the stuff that you're talking about kind of goes together, and starting with the values, having the consistency. But we talk about success a lot and consistency, right? We said that word so many times. But then on the other side of that is letting go, giving up, quitting, which sometimes people will say quitting is bad. And then there's sometimes where we need to quit. But something I've heard you make a distinction between in the past is the difference between surrender and giving up. So I'm curious if you could expand on that a little and explain what the difference is.
They're so different. Surrender to me is staying connected to a higher force and your own higher wisdom and having faith and belief in yourself. It's not self-confidence, but it is connected to self-trust. Trusting that you've got what it takes and the universe has your back. Giving up means I can't do it. I'm smaller than this. I lose. You win, I lose. So there's a big difference. I can use my own, I'm an ultra running athlete. So I do ultra races. These are races that are anything above marathon distance, but always on trails. And undoubtedly, because people think like you love running. Well, I love running, but not after like 10 miles. After 10 miles, nobody likes running, So there is a point for sure where it could be at 15 miles, 25 miles, 35 miles, where you are just going, what the hell am I doing? Like, really, what am I doing? Everything hurts. You've completely lost track of your why. You haven't lost track of your why, but your why looks stupid to you. And, you're probably alone somewhere on a trail looking for, you're wondering if you're lost. And in that moment, you have a choice to surrender and say, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and believe in moving forward. Or you can give up and you can quit the race. The difference is surrendering allows me, more often than not, if I'm not injured, to get to the finish line. And giving up doesn't. It has me stopping, giving up, and not getting to the finish line. Surrendering is a very powerful tool for moving forward in life.
Yeah, I like that. I like that juxtaposition of surrendering to move forward. It is not giving up. It's a stark contrast, and it goes back to what you were just saying about your values, and the value being faith. As you said, it's confidence beyond confidence in the self, but confidence that the universe, the higher power, he, she, they, whoever has got me. And I'm always curious where that comes from in you, because it could surrender, faith, belief, all of these things. Is it something that you're born with, you personally? And then
No.
is it something that you can craft? Because using myself as an example, I've never been an overly religious person. I've never been one to, seek outside answers, let's say. But in my study and my own personal growth, I see the importance of that. Like I want to surrender to the higher power, as they say, because I can see how that can guide me. But especially if I'm the person who's like, the universe has not been kind to me so far, right? Like if
Yeah.
when life has been hard, that I was dealt that bad hand. It's like, how do I start to surrender when up until now, what I've received from that has not been to my benefit?
Yeah. And I'll say that I'm limited in that I cannot speak for somebody who has repeatedly been dealt a bad hand, because I have not. I can speak to my own experience, which is when I surrender, I connect, I partner, I put my ego aside, and I say, it's not just me. So it's not really about self-confidence, because you use the word confidence. It's not about confidence. It is about trust and responsibility. So yes, I surrender, but I take responsibility for putting my next step forward. I'm not waiting for some force to come and make everything okay for me. I'm saying I'm not going to quit. I'm going to put just one foot in front of the other. Then I'm going to try to put another foot. I get that I'm not running right now, but can I walk? I'll walk. I get that I can't walk right now. I'll take a minute. I'll sit down on this rock. But, so it's a partnership when we talk about surrendering. But to answer your first question, which is where does it come from? I was not born with it. No, I wasn't born with it at all. It comes from what you talk about in your work so often, which is doing hard things. So it is a practice. It's not a personality trait. Maybe some people have it. I didn't. For me, it's completely created in that, I started, to be completely honest, hard things came my way and I tried to dodge them, and then I did them and I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then I actually went looking for hard things and searching for hard things. And I bring hard things into my life intentionally because it's a muscle and I want to keep growing it and keep it healthy. So I think it's completely in our hands to become the kind of person that can do hard things.
Yeah, I really enjoy, like you said, it's that surrender or trust, whatever word you want to use. It's not that I just surrender and then let the universe figure it out for me, or that I just trust that everything will work out. Like I have to, it's both and. It's not either or. It's not either I trust or I don't. It's yes, I trust, yes, I believe, but I also must take the action necessary. Like the universe has me if I am doing what I need to do. And then, like you said, I can get the result. The universe will help me finish the race, but I have to be running it. I can't stop running and let the universe carry me to the finish line. And I think that that's like the disconnect where, for myself personally and for other people, where it's just like, if I just believe, then things will work out. Or, if I pray, if I meditate, if I mantra, whatever these things are, That's part of the equation. Like you do need that belief, but you also have to be doing your part. You have to pay the dues as well. And as you said, sometimes that's just doing the hard things and realizing that you get better, and you get better, the hard things get easier. So everything comes together at the end. I'm curious if you have any examples from your own personal life of times, like you just said, that where there was something hard where you said at the beginning, you were almost trying to dodge them, like you're trying to avoid this stuff. And then eventually you decided to face it and realize not only was it something that you could accomplish, but it's something that you ended up growing from.
Yeah. So the example that comes to mind was I was for 3 decades a fashion executive in the luxury space, and it was very comfortable. And it was very, imagine you've put in the work and you're acknowledged, and if you lose your job or if you leave, doesn't matter. There's always another position in another fashion house for you. And imagine at the same time reaching a point like I did in my mid-40s, where I realized that what I was doing no longer held any meaning for me, no longer was satisfying in any way. And the idea of doing the same thing for 30 years more was very difficult and untenable for me. But on the outside, it looked like I would be crazy to leave that. What else would I do? And, I left that world. I found myself after 3 decades, like in what I call the desert of my soul, which was just going, oh my God, I'm in my mid-40s. Suddenly I don't have a source of income, even though I've been working since 16. I come from, a good family. They have money. But for me to be divorced with 2 small kids in my 40s and not be able to actually make a living was a very, very big thing. And it was either, do I say, woe me, which I did, to be totally honest. Do I blame everyone else, which I did? Do I, say this fashion industry is horrible and it's all their fault, which I did? Or do I buckle down and say, how can I take what I have and create something new? And, today, which is like 10, 15 years later, I am more successful by all measures, including financially, than I ever was in that world, because I was willing to put one foot in front of the other. So that I would say took courage on my part and commitment to doing the hard thing.
So take me back to that moment, right? There, 10, 15 years ago, like you said, I appreciate the honesty. You're like, I was woe is me. I was like, screw them. Like they're bad. I was all of those negative things. But there was an inflection point. Something switched that let you go like, okay, I'm going to take it in a different direction. I'm not going to wallow in this. Like, so what was the mindset? What was the thought, the initial thing? What was the self-talk? Like, what was the thing that changed your trajectory and led to, again, if you think about the multiverse, right? Where it's like, there's a parallel universe where you didn't make that decision and you just stayed and you cried about it more and more and more, and you're not where you are now. So what was that point that changed everything? And how did you actually make that happen?
So, Paul, after I was out of fashion, there was these years that I was like kind of just trying to keep my head above water. I'm a consultant, I'm this, I'm that, but basically I was making nothing and trying to figure out, what can I do next? During that period of time, I would love to tell you that I had an epiphany. I did not. What was going on was I was at my son's cross-country meet, and I don't know if you've been to these things ever, but they're the most horrible, boring things in the whole world. You just stand on the side while your, teenage son runs by and glares at you, and you go, yay, and he just glares at you and whatever. I'm like, what am I doing here? I was already feeling kind of worthless, and then here I am at this cross-country meet. So I did what I always do, which is I connect with someone, and they open up to me, and I'm there for them, and I help them think through and access their own higher wisdom. This is what I did when I was a fashion executive. This is what I did with my clients and teams and coworkers. I did not know that then, but this was the core competency I developed then. I was still doing it. And after the meet, my son and I went to lunch and he goes, "Where were you? I didn't see you when I walked by." I said, "Well, I was talking to Josh's mom because you don't care if I'm there. And it was more helpful to, be helpful to her." And he said to me, "Mom, you always do that. You're always like helping other people." And I said, "I know, I wish I could make a living from it." And maybe he was 11, 12. He looked at me and he said, "You can." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You could be a coach." Paul, there is no reason why my 12-year-old knew anything about coaching or that coaching is a career. So these are the things that make me believe that, to your point about a parallel universe, like something is going on. And I was tuned into it. In that moment, when you said, I said to myself, "Oh, I got to look into this." And after that, it was just putting one step in front of the other. I got certified 3 times. Nobody cares about that. But the point is, I was like, wow, there is a world in which I can be useful and helpful and create prosperity and be like a legitimate professional.
Yeah. Again, the thing that I always am like, that I notice in stories like this is like, how many people are there that have a story just like that exact same thing happened to? They're every soccer game, they're the one giving out advice. They're the one their friend always comes to for advice. And their son or their boyfriend or their husband or their wife or their someone or their mom says, you could be a coach. And they go, "I could never do that." And they just push it to the back. So there's something, that is that one little thing inside of you, that spark that allowed you to say like, "I want to actually do this." And it's that trust, as you said, that surrender. Because if we try to logically think through all of this stuff, then somehow it's like we'll logic ourselves out of it. So I love that your values, as you said, we can see them kind of guiding this whole process, even before you maybe knew what your values were or knew that
True.
these were your values. So I think it's just very interesting for people listening to, to kind of take away that our values are there, whether we realize it or not. And you can kind of reverse engineer it, because if you're like, "Well, I don't know what my values are," you can go, "Well, like, what are the things that I'm always doing? What is the way that I've been living my life?" And that kind of shows you. And then if you don't like that, you can maybe edit it with time.
Mm. But Paul, let me add 2 things to that. Number one, you have to be a forensic listener in life. So I heard my son say something. Most people don't even hear it. You're right that most people say, "I can't do it." But before that, they don't even hear it. So you have to be very awake and alert to life. Signs are coming your way all the time. And then, of course, in coaching, this is truly, I would say, our core competency is our ability to listen for what is not being said, to listen for what is behind what is being said. But then also, Paul, I didn't say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be a coach." I just said, let me look into this. That's what I want people to do and to understand. We're not asking you to marry someone. We're asking you to go on a date. And most people, they just want to marry an idea right away. Be an action hero by taking one step. That one step will have you taking another step. So all I did was Google life coach after that conversation. That's all I did. And then when things came up, it was like one thing led to another. But I didn't say like, "Okay, I'm going to be a life coach." I didn't even tell anyone I was coaching for 3 years. I didn't tell my family because I thought they would like make fun of me. So back to consistency, thinking
Yeah.
long-term, no shortcuts.
Yeah, it's great. I love that term, forensic listener. That's really good. I've never heard that before. I'm definitely going to steal that. And as you said, it's kind of just being open and aware and allowing the signs to hit you, and just being ready when luck strikes, right? Luck is luck. You can't control when luck comes, but are you going to be in a position to take it when it gets there? So I really love
Yeah.
that. And, you know, you've given us so many good tips already. The last couple questions that I have are just around change, what we've been talking about this whole time. So the first question is, Carolyn, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
The change that I want to see most in the world is people committing to their identity, not dividing themselves up and being different in different roles and different situations. People understanding that who they are and who they are becoming is the most important thing. Not what they do necessarily, not what they say, but who they are being. That is what I consider your identity. And I would love to see every single person doing whatever work it takes to really become clear about who they are. So when you ask them, who are you? They can say, I am this and that.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but I think that would be a beautiful change. And then the last question that I have is, what is one action step that listeners can take right now today to start whatever journey of change they're on, to start making it easier?
I would say the one action step is find somebody, or maybe you can find it on Google, do a values assessment. Understand what your top life values are. And the way you do that, let's say Brene Brown has a great one online that people can do, is, you look at 100 values, you rate them from 0 to 10, and then you take all the 10s and choose 10 in those, and then you take those 10 and choose only 3. And this should take many hours if you're doing it right, and a lot of reflection. And knowing your top values will allow you to understand why you're doing the things you're doing and why you're not doing the things you're doing. So awareness is what it brings, and that's always the starting point.
The reality is, there's no 100% guaranteed way to guarantee success in all areas of your life. It just doesn't exist. There are so many elements of life that are simply outside of your direct control. But fortunately, there are ways that you can learn to make it easier. And while there are no ways to guarantee success, there are ways to guarantee failure. And not understanding the basic fundamentals that Carolyn laid out in this episode are definitely a way to lock in failure in the long term. So remember Carolyn's advice: consistency over intensity. Surrender, but don't give up. And be sure to be taking active and not passive action. That is change made easy. If you're really passionate about making this change stick, then I just have to remind you about my free weekly newsletter. Don't miss out on joining the thousands of change seekers just like you who get a curated list each week of 5 educational, informative, and inspiring pieces of content that will help you on your quest for change. Go to the notes of whatever app you're listening on and click the link that says free newsletter now. And you'll be signed up to get free tips sent straight to your inbox every Friday that will help make your change journey easier. All you have to do is click free newsletter right now. Go to that link, and I'll see you back here every Tuesday and Thursday for new episodes of Change Made Easy.